Hello, Scott Hebner here. Welcome back to the Next Frontiers of AI podcast. Our objective, well, it's to partner with industry experts and pioneers to explore the latest developments shaping the future of AI. And with innovation cycles moving at warp speed, staying up to date is more important than ever. In fact, I think we're seeing more innovation over the next 2 years than we saw over the last 2 years. Gen AI and LLMs have clearly set a critical foundation for this innovation. And just like the browsers did 20 years ago in the early internet age, the browsers created a gateway into the internet for everybody. And today, Gen AI has established a gateway into AI for everyone. But just like back in the internet age, where the value in business actually resulted from building on top of and around the browsers, we'll see the same thing happen with AI in business. Said another way, the Gen AI wars of today will not define the future of AI. The true competition will be about how businesses create integrated AI ecosystems of models that not only fix the limitations in today's AI, but open up countless new possibilities. This is very much true with agentic AI and AI-powered decision intelligence. Companies that recognize this change early by focusing on building value on and around generative AI as a foundation will lead the way in AI innovation and ROI. In this episode, we'll dive deep into what is happening in the financial services sector, which historically has not only been an early adopter of emerging technologies, but a leader in driving meaningful innovation that ultimately spread across all other industries. This is because they operate in a highly regulated industry. They deal with high-dimensional problem sets and must adapt on the fly in real time more than any other industry. What happens with AI and financial services will surely shape what happens elsewhere. With that, I am thrilled to have Jayeeta Putatunda, the director of the AI Center of Excellence at Fitch Group, join us to help us understand what the next generation of AI is shaping up to be in financial services. Welcome, Jayeeta. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Scott, for having me here, and really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. This is my favorite subject, so let's get started.
Yeah, I know it is. I think we first met due to, I can't remember. I know it was over LinkedIn, and I know it was in the time frame that you were doing a presentation at the AI Summit in New York City, right?
Yeah. Like I keep saying, like whenever I'm in a presentation mode, that I can talk about AI in financial services, AI and what LLMs can not do, like like endlessly. So excited to be here, and thank you for having me again.
Yeah, I think we speak a similar language on what we think is all going on here. And by the way, are you in New York now?
Yeah, but I live in like the other side of the river. I'm in New Jersey, yeah, I go to work. I currently work at Fitch Ratings, which is in the downtown area. So I take the path train. Very much fun.
Yeah, Wall Street, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, so let's kind of dive into this. Obviously the objective here is to learn more about financial services as a sector, as an industry, and what's all happening there with AI. Again, I do think my observation over decades of all the transformations, it's always been that sector that has sort of led the way with innovation because it's such a complex industry to operate in. So, as we sit here today, how would you describe the current state of AI in financial services?
Yeah, I mean, and to begin with, I think I come from a very different background, right? So to give you a little bit of context, I did my undergrad in economics and statistics. Then did a couple of years of consulting, and then felt like that I need to do more hands-on technical work and kind of leverage that part of my statistical brain, and that's why I did my master's in quantitative methods and modeling. And then my goal was that how can I apply some of these, very key, like you said, predictive analytics, time series analytics, very traditional kind of, methodologies, and apply it for different use cases and domains. So I tried media, I tried ad tech, and now I am in finance. So I'm having a lot of fun. Now, why I mentioned that is because if you think how the financial industry or the services has kind of grown. Like you said, we have always been leading from the front when it comes to more traditional or predictive or like more deterministic based models. Now with
Mhm.
like AI, I think the application areas have tremendous potential, but we need to be cautious of how we are taking our steps, right? Why I say that, because we are highly governed, and rightly so, because there's so much to lose, so much consequences at play here. So I would say I wouldn't say that financial services has not taken up generative AI head first. It has, but we are adopting with like a very careful approach in a much more governed way. And what I hear from from some of my colleagues around the industry, and what I also experience is that we need to solve use cases that actually like drives the most value to our clients, to our users, even to our internal folks who use our products. So at the end of the day, if we can help with like operational efficiency, like making sure that we're reducing manual workload, or even like help with deep research, that's part of all financial use case, right? Like doesn't matter which kind of financial services firm you are, analyzing news, different variations of financial like documents, how varied and unstructured they are, like annual reports, 10K ESG reports, thousands of variations of financial reports. If we can like cater to those areas that drives the maximum value, I think we will win in a great way. And then that would lead the path and the trust in the system, right? And then we can take on more challenging as well as very more complicated tasks, I would say.
I remember very clearly back, I think it was 2016 through 2021, I was the CMO of IBM's AI business. And I
That's
remember
fantastic.
all of our great references back then with Watson were in
Mhm.
financial services, and a lot of work done with the predictive models. And I sort of get what you're saying. Gen AI, the LLMs today, it's about
Mhm.
research, it's about automating simple tasks,
Mhm.
uh, and which is good, right? It's a major step forward in productivity for individuals,
Absolutely.
but in your industry, and I think elsewhere, businesses are going to want a lot more out of AI, the
Mhm.
potential decision intelligence and problem solvings and solving, approaches to how to solve a goal, whether it be
Absolutely.
individual or organizational, becomes really key.
Mhm.
And, from our previous conversations, I know you believe, and as I do, that there are some, pretty significant limitations to what traditional AI models can do. That includes
Yep.
LLMs. And I would assume that be very much true in the financial, use cases that you're involved in. True.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely true. I think there are, I think, two big areas. First, explainability, or you can talk as like transparency. That how did we get there? Like, what is this black box model? Because if you think from the perspective of, say, any financial leader who's looking at the the final prediction or output and saying that how did we get here? In our predictive models, we had the opportunity, or we had the process to trace it back, do a lot of step by step approach, weights analysis. We could do like actual insights that which input or parameter got the most weightage, and then that's why it was like the output here. It kind of becomes a little hard, and that's why I think the new reasoning model capability is getting a lot of traction, because potentially that could at least help us understand or think through the steps that it's thinking and taking individually, and then kind of help us a little bit, say, take one step ahead to kind of fix some of these issues that we have. Another issue is that we have to control the chaos, and when I say chaos, is that LLM models are, like we all know, are non-deterministic. So even if there's like we are inputting the same input, nothing has changed, there is a potential that you would get a slightly different variations, and that is unacceptable in a uh, highly governed, regulated, where you have to show traceability, trace back, and keep like audit trail, and the inputs needs to be controlled with guardrails, with like human supervision, with like a lot of evaluation. So I think those are like some of the areas that we can do like better, that the current LLM landscape might not do that well. I think another area that comes to mind is the data quality, right? Like, so think about like all the big open source LLMs or even like the closed source LLMs, we have no insight on what kind of data they were trained on, what could be the potential biases are. So before implementing it with our use cases, there needs to be like a thorough testing or a rigorous testing round where you are checking for biases, you are like evaluating it if it can be harmful or some kind of negative consequences that you might not think about, and your client or your end user would be the first to experience it, which would not be ideal. So I think there are multi layers of a little bit of evaluation that needs to go as well in the current state that we are in.
Yeah, my guest last week, Mark Lemaitre, he was a CTO of Scamby. I think he had mentioned that some 10% of what these models are trained on is synthetic data, which even complicates it even more because it's synthetic. So, well, I agree with you. And what we have today is a set of AI technologies that are very powerful, right? But they're based on a static past, right? Learned in the past, what has happened in the past, and it makes them good if you want your future to be just like your past. But that's not really the case, certainly in financial services sector. So this idea of, quote, I use the word quotes, AI reasoning, you start to get into new use cases. And I know you've been this huge proponent of, the RAG frameworks and how they've been progressing to address some of the limits in the LLMs and predictive models. So, tell us a little bit more about what you envision RAG to evolve to in the future and sort of the roadmap on how we got there.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think we can talk about that roadmap. You remember I shared with you where the goal is to showcase how did the RAG framework went from like a basic RAG, how did it go forward to an understanding like a vanilla based RAG, and I think we had a visual for that. Right? I think we can bring that up. Absolutely. Here, so look at this. Like the architecture progression is like so. I really enjoyed it because I feel that we have progressed really well. We started with like LLMs where we just had access to the context window. Then we had a vanilla RAG where we were just connecting our applications to a simple vector data lookup and then trying to export information from there. So that solves the question that you were saying that, hey, we are not using a static data, we are using something that's outside the LLM. We are exporting from there and doing like a query match based on the user's input. But there's so much more advancement that has come into the space. We can now like retrieve and re-rank because if you think about a use case where you're actually reviewing, I would say like 10-15 documents that is each of 50 to 100 pages, there could be so many potential matches. So how do you differentiate between what's informative versus what's relevant? So a retrieval and re-ranking kind of helps us with that. And then if you come through the follow through the chain, you would see that there's of course graph rag, there's multimodal because now you can process images and text together, but we are at a stage, and I'm sure everybody's tired of hearing this term agentic, but I think how I describe agentic is that we need to move beyond just one task based solution at a time. What we need to come up with like as a way is that we need to run goal based solutions and these agents will help us break that down into simpler task-based modules that then individually can look up any databases. So in this case, it's not only just one simple vector lookup, but you can break it down into a more nuanced multi-stage retrieval process where it can handle complex queries. It can also incorporate reasoning capabilities. And I was looking through some papers that are actually trying to do this. Like say, if you are looking for a particular concept, or if you're looking up some query and there is some concept that the LLM or the user is not sure about, we can also have a more web search agent incorporated in the pipeline that the user can invoke, saying that, hey, look up this term that I'm not sure about, and then that reasoning or that learning from that agent comes into a pipeline process as an input. So fascinating times. I think our goal should be to kind of create a more safe pipeline that's sustainable, that is scalable, but is also very observable, so that there's always somebody human in the loop. We don't want to automate end-to-end anything because there needs to be, like I said, very specific evaluation saying that are the retrieved documents good enough? Is it meeting our information standards before we pass it on to our final user? So yeah, I'm very excited about what RAG and agentic and more uh, structured query RAG can help us do multi-turn interactions across multiple knowledge domains. Exciting times indeed.
Yeah, I see, the more I talk to companies and experts and
Mm-hmm.
read, this whole framework you just talked about, RAG, right? And as it progresses and becomes more sophisticated,
Mm-hmm.
it's so key to creating an AI agent in the first place, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's even more important when you have multiple agents that are trying to collaborate around some goal or some
Mm-hmm.
problem to solve, right?
Yeah.
Um, just to back up one step here, so talk to us a little bit about knowledge graphs,
Mm-hmm.
um, and what that has allowed. What kind of new
Yeah.
use cases, for example, in financial services. I know generally speaking, they're about the knowledge
Mm-hmm.
graphs in the graph reg, context, meaning, right? It
Mm-hmm.
creates a framework for more
Mm-hmm.
transparency and explainability. But what does it actually allow people to do in financial services?
Uh, Absolutely. I think in simple terms, if you think about it, it helps us create a data lineage. It helps us create a data chain that either our LLMs can utilize for their reasoning purposes, or even a human, when they're evaluating, can like ground their the output of the LLM based on that knowledge graphs. And I mean, knowledge graphs has been like around for quite some time now, right? Like the industry has been trying to leverage it in so many forms and ways, but I guess the complexity of incorporating it all gets into the way of how we can effectively utilize it. But I think in the agentic space, or agent based or task based agents that we are creating, I think it would definitely help us like break that down. The agentic retrieval can only get to the sections where it needs to go. It will help with like enhanced data contextualization, like I was talking about, like helping set that data lineage, connecting different kinds of financial entities, customers, transactions. How did they how did the market events affect in various market ups and downs, social media content, news content? How did that affect the company share price? There's so much that can be done with so much of these rich context. And I feel another area that would, like I was saying, it helps to ground the LLM's output. So it will definitely help in improving the explainability part if we can effectively utilize it in a way so that we have these maps, we have these semantic connections. How do we utilize that to showcase like a framework and go back and make sure that it's audit friendly, it's more transparent, and there's like a source that it kind of goes back to and say that here is where I got this output from, because this chain talks about this 5 6, like 1 2 3 4 in a chain process. So
Right.
definitely would help in keeping the governance and the legal risk frameworks up to speed.
Yeah, it's the way I've been thinking about it is it's a step on the ladder,
Yeah.
right, to AI reasoning or agentic AI, in the sense
Mhm.
that you have the LLMs, right, that are correlative in nature, and then you
Mhm.
have the chain of thought kind of things that breaks a
Yeah.
problem down, and you can
Mhm.
go back and think a little bit about things, and it revises itself, but still correlative based.
Yeah.
Then you got semantic reasoning, which I think is when you get into knowledge graphs, right? The
Mhm.
relationships between entities,
Yep.
um, and a data set, and it kind of gives you context and meaning.
Entities and
Obviously,
movements, like how did it move because of this one move? What was the response of that one parameter changing to this parameter that I'm tracking? So yeah, like you said, absolutely.
but when you get to decision intelligence, right, you got to build even on the knowledge graphs. And you
Mhm.
had on your previous RAG framework at the
Yeah.
very bottom, causal RAG. And
Yeah.
I think everyone who watches these podcasts knows I'm a huge fan of causal AI.
Yeah.
Um, Simply because the whole world operates on causality.
Hmm.
Humans operate on it. It's a core innate part. You know,
Yeah.
Everything we do, essentially, you're processing cause and effect. Alarm clock goes off. It's like, what do
Yeah.
you hit snooze or not? You're thinking cause and effect.
Yeah.
That takes graphs to a new level of value, right? So I'm just curious, how did you stumble across causal AI in financial services?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's multiple levels. So when I did my undergrad, I think, like I said, I did my undergrad in economics. That was the first time I heard my professor saying that causation is not correlation. So that's when I first heard causation. But in the actual financial term, you remember I shared that paper, very interesting paper that talks about how LLMs could be causal parrots. It really got me thinking that when you actually, and when you are not aware how the LLMs are structured or how they're actually generating insights, you might on the on the broader side, when you think about it, feel that it's actually giving you a causation. But this paper was really enlightening, and it was talking about how most of the time it's showing the causation or the concept of causation, because either it has seen some kind of causation relationships in the training data, or it's translating the correlation into a way that you feel when you read that it's causation. So it's very interesting. I would highly encourage our audience to look at that paper. I think, and that's where, and I think that's also one of the point where we connected, because I was doing this keynote at the AI Summit, where my goal
Mhm.
was to kind of highlight that all these limitations, even from, like, the advanced track that we have, because we still get some layers of hallucination, we get some layers of knowledge staleness, even if you are doing a lot of different variations of vector databases or looking up different sources. There's still a possibility that you can do more contextual reasoning. And how can you do more contextual reasoning if you have, with your data that you already have in your system, help guide the LLM think through that flow of causation. So what I mean by that is that you can run different variations of, like, say, think about it, like, say, if you want to do customer behavior analysis, right, like for market research, RAG will help you compile all kinds of data from, like, say, surveys, transaction records, like maybe your social media or whatever. And the causal AI kind of helps drive the factors that drove your customers in the past, helping you or enabling you to kind of see through what kind of offerings, different promotions, or different kind of specific targeted marketing strategies that you can do to kind of get them on your side, right? Like, it's not only like aggregating all of the data about them, which is helpful, that's what RAG is doing for you, but where do you drive the insights, that what has worked before with them, what were the market situations then, did we have like a less inflation zone, and that's why maybe people were spending more, now we have these kind of higher inflation rates, what else can we do, and what kind of derivative causalities can we identify from that scenario, apply it here, and then generate newer ideas, right? So it's all about, like, basing your analysis not only on what you have today, but like basing on actual and I see you smiling because I know you love you love causality. Like, give me some more inputs, like, what do you think about it?
Yeah, no, I think what you're describing is what I would consider to be AI decision intelligence at
Mm-hmm.
a
Yeah,
higher level, for a business person. Causal
exactly.
AI, causal AI and causal RAG and all that. I mean, those are the techniques, and
Yeah,
it's based on, you know,
for folks like us to actually do it, but then yeah.
yeah, it's really sophisticated probabilistic math, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, I love the quote from Judea Pearl in his book, the Book of Why, that says, statistical probabilities encode a static world.
Mm-hmm.
Causality tells you how that world changes when the world around you changes. Which,
Changes.
I mean,
Yep,
is that not decision intelligence? And
that's
so, if
absolutely
AI is going to get to the world of decision intelligence and planning
true. Mm-hmm.
and helping solve, complex problems, it's going to need to have decision intelligence. And
Mm-hmm.
decision intelligence, by definition, at least the
Mm-hmm.
human version
Yep.
of it, is
Mm-hmm.
based on causality. I mean, right? So, and the good news is these technologies are starting to, become democratized out there for people to, tap into it. You don't have to be an elite data scientist or AI engineer anymore to do this stuff.
Yeah.
Um, you know, well, let's so I know we have a good chart here on how does this get sort of incorporated into like a real business, and like in financial services. Like, what are the components of it? What's this? Let's bring this to life a little bit. If we can
Yeah.
bring up the chart.
Yeah, no, absolutely sure. So I think, but I would like to start with saying that I definitely feel that the market, or like, the adoption of causality into like how we can effectively utilize is still in its very early, I would say, like exploratory stage, where we are trying to understand how to like combine all these complex modules together that make sense, and then test it rigorously through like human in the loop and evaluations to make sure that we are not, adding or incrementing any of the risk factors at any of the stages. But I think if you think, or how I think about, or if how causality is mapped, it's like it's mapped in different kinds of analysis that you can do. First, you can come up with your structural causal models, and I can say that usually banks develop, structural causal maps. It helps them map what kind of macroeconomic factors, like I was talking about, interest rate or inflation, kind of directly influence different kinds of, I would say, like loan defaults, or enables like so that they can redo the risk assessments, or like make more robust risk assessment framework. So that's one kind of analysis. Others would be like a counterfactual, like you see here. What we are trying to do here is kind of do a what if scenario, like you said. When the real world changes, or the parameters in the real world changes, we change that or incorporate that with this what if analysis, and says that, hey, what is going to be the impact of I don't know, some alternative monetary policy to today for me as a financial institution, and we can like evaluate it, how it could potentially change by considering how it affected us in the past, what kind of portfolio performance has changed when it happened, I don't know, like 10 years ago, and how it can help me be more prepared, so that I can be more equipped, or like more ready to make some future decisions, so that we are not in the guessing mode, but more we are on the actual factual analysis mode, where we know what has happened in the past, we know what's happening now, how can we map it all together to kind of help us guide through that. And of course, like I think causal discovery algorithms are very, very common, where I know like most of the investment firms usually do, to kind of unearth different kinds of hidden relationships between market indicators and like asset performances. And I feel every industry in the financial services domain kind of utilizes it in some form or the way, even like economists who are predicting what's going to happen in the market. Because I know in my economics module in my undergrad, we did very thorough causal analysis using econometrics. So I know for a fact that they definitely use it, and like the applications are diverse. Our goal as data scientists today is to kind of bring this part of the econometrics analysis into generative AI, and see how we can, help control the chaos of generative AI using the causal components. Uh, yeah, very, very exciting times.
Yeah, what I've observed in companies that are working on this, having talked to them, is that a lot of them have the knowledge graphs,
Yeah.
which again represents how entities relate to each other. Then they
Mm-hmm.
turn that into a causal graph based on
Yeah.
their know-how and their expertise. Then they
Subject matter.
apply,
Yeah.
like you had on the chart, the causal discovery algorithms that then
Yeah.
actually tell you how things actually work, not how you think they work, right?
Yeah.
Identifying causal drivers, and especially in very complex spaces. And then that makes the model more intelligent and adapts the causal graph. And then
Yeah.
as you do counterfactual analysis, or what if scenarios and things of that nature, it just continues to learn, and it gets
Yep.
smarter and smarter, but it's adapting with you, where
Mm-hmm.
LLM aren't really capable of doing that too well, at least from their core intelligence, right?
That's
And
true.
and so I'm assuming you guys are approaching this, and I know I've talked to other financial companies and people, data scientists there, that are doing the same thing at financial services. How would you net out what you're able to do now that you couldn't do before? I mean, is the big thing the explainability and auditability and the traceability, or is it the interventions, or what do you?
I mean, the easiest thing to solve for and to get the maximum value out would be explainability and transparency. There's also this, like I was talking about with the new models, there's this chain of thought that you can utilize, and chain of thought with the reasoning, with association with all the causality maps, would definitely help you get to more stronger reasoning models that would take you one step forward than they being like a causal parrot. Maybe they're going to get a little better, but it needs a lot of testing. It needs a lot of thorough use cases that we can maybe explore and see how it's working. But it's definitely a very exciting space. And if you see the research, I would like to highlight it. If you see the research space, there's so much interest in causality. There's this one, I'm blanking on the conference name, but it's happening in sometimes around May. It's only based on causality. I can share the link with you later on. But very fascinating to see so much interest, and I think everybody's getting the hint that this will be required to like make generative AI more useful.
Yeah, the research that we've been doing at the Cube research here is about 10%, maybe 12% of businesses or at least experimenting with causal AI. So it's a very small number. Although I think a majority of pioneers, are selecting or saying that causal AI is a technology that they're not using today, but plan to, because, in the end, it gives you the explainability and the transparency.
Yeah.
It can allow you to intervene with the models, right? Interrogate them, right?
Yeah.
And then it can actually help you understand how your business actually operates and how it changes over time. They're all things that LLMs can't do, right? And, so in the end, my view is that sort of the North Star, if you will, is that, and this might be, is it 2025, 2026, 2027? I mean, the time will come where I think causal AI is going to revolutionize business decision making. It's the most critical component or ingredient to be fused into AI, because it will help humans understand the precise chain of events leading to a desired outcome, and then play around with the variables and what if I did this instead, blah blah blah. Right?
Exactly.
It's going to move us.
Absolutely.
Right.
Completely. Yeah.
It's going to move us from predictions today to interventions. It's going to go from tasks to achieving goals.
Yeah.
And and I think ultimately, highlighting what you had just said is that in the end, probably its biggest contribution, certainly in the near term, is going to be to infuse more trust into AI outcomes.
Yep.
Because in the end, I think in business, especially when you get into business critical decision making, people are only going to trust the AI systems if they can, one, transparently explain themselves in the language of the user, help users understand why one decision may be better than another, and actually allow the users to intervene and test alternate scenarios, right?
Yeah.
And that's where you're going to get reliable AI from. Where today you're kind of black box, right? Do I trust this thing? And that's why I think it's become increasingly important as we go through time here, right?
Yeah.
You agree?
Absolutely. I think with every point, and I feel with this framework, the business side and the tech side, that is folks like us, will come together in a more constructive way so that they can help us guide through like how do we intervene with the LLM outputs, because they know the business best, we understand the tech best, and I think this is going to be like a fascinating time to work together to solve some of the use cases. Exciting to see what the financial services industry do with this tech.
Yeah, well, I'm working with some vendors that are doing it for solar farms and energy, others for supply chain.
Fascinating.
Some for process manufacturing, right? And manufacturing lines, and for robotics on the manufacturing floor. And it just goes on and on and on, because you want to get to root cause. And, so, we'll see what happens here. I think, we're moving on from Gen AI. Agentic AI is the thing. A lot of the RAG technologies are being used. You got chain of thought, semantic reasoning with the knowledge graphs and all that. But I think over time, it's my belief that the key differentiating ingredient will be causality. And it sounds like in a world of financial services, if we can really figure this out as an industry, it is game changing, right?
Yeah, I think the opportunities are limitless, but we need to like address it in a very structured, thoughtful way so that it can be applied, implemented, and then evaluated. And I think everybody, like anything we do in life, we always want to get to the root of it. We just don't treat the symptoms. You need to get to the root cause, and I think this is what will help us, not treat the symptom, saying that, oh, this output is not good, let's fix it with like maybe a small language model, but then actually go back, why is it not good? Should we like more put some more causal analysis, like are we doing the relations correct? And then that help us guide the narrative or the generation and control the chaos, like I keep saying.
Yeah, you can tell you work in financial services, because you're right that this isn't going to solve world peace overnight, maybe never, but it is incrementally as you infuse more and more of these causal techniques into your AI model ecosystem that then feeds agents. You're just going to slowly but surely get more reasoning, more decision intelligence, more trust, more explainability.
Absolutely.
So, all right, Jayeeta, it's time to wrap up here. I wish I can really go on for hours and hours here talking about this. It becomes too long. So, thanks much for, joining us today. It's great insights, and, keep us up to date on the progress. We'll have you back one of these days. A big thank you to Brendan Ryder for the great job in producing the show. And most importantly, thank you all, as always, for joining us on the Next Frontiers of AI podcast, hosted by SiliconANGLE and the Cube Research. I so appreciate you tuning in. And stay tuned for more research and analysis from our team as we dive deeper into what is shaping the future of AI in business. And, make sure you go check out thecuberesearch.com and siliconangle.com. That's where we publish all of our content and podcasts, so we can get access to those there. And we'll see you on the next round here. Again, we are the leader in tech analysis and news. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.